Alright, we're back. Hopefully this works. Um, throat ain't got any better. Sorry about that. So, presidential reconstruction. We're going to compare two different types of reconstruction. We have presidential reconstruction, and if you think of the presidents, Lincoln is a president. So we already know his view because of his second inaugural address, and that's to be lenient on the South. The other view is to be harsh or to punish the South. So we'll get in the other view in just a second. But Lincoln tells everybody what he wants to do. Let the South come back. We'll join up. We're good. And this Confederate sympathizer named John Wilkes Booth assassinated Lincoln. He went to see a play, Our American Cousin. Shortly after the end of the Civil War, he's stressed out, he's tired, and he's shot while watching the play at Ford's Theater. Booth was later killed in a farmhouse in Maryland. All right, so Lincoln had chosen a guy from Tennessee named Andrew Johnson to be his vice president. He doesn't have the clout of Abraham Lincoln. The guy's from Tennessee, and he's from an area where the mountainous area in eastern Tennessee, not the area in the southwest part, that Memphis area where you had a lot of slavery. These guys in the east, the mountains, they didn't secede. There are little pockets of states that never seceded because they didn't feel they wanted to fight. So this slide really lets you know Andrew Johnson takes over and he continues presidential reconstruction. So when we talk about presidential reconstruction, you're talking about Lincoln and Andrew Johnson. And remember, Andrew Johnson is not Lincoln. Lincoln's the man. Lincoln won re-election. Johnson is a outsider from Tennessee. And I'm going to try to go ahead and show the slideshow and hope that it doesn't mess up. Alright, there's a picture of Lincoln getting a bullet in the back of the head. And notice Lincoln doesn't have his top hat on. He had taken it off, and it was recovered, and they still have it today. So now, we talked about presidential reconstruction. Here is radical Republican reconstruction. So here was the goal. They wanted to punish the South. They wanted to help slaves. They wanted to give slaves opportunities. They had nothing, no education, no housing, no money, no clothes. They wanted to provide for those guys. And as a result of African Americans getting the right to vote, and we'll talk about that, some southern state governments had African Americans that were elected. And what I want you to remember is Abraham Lincoln was a Republican. And the radical Republicans were still against slavery, obviously, but they were even more so against the South. So at this time period, we have Republicans as president and in Congress, but they do not get along. There's a radical Republican group in the House of Representatives and the Senate who really oppose the South and want to punish them. So we're all on the same team, you just got different groups. And there's just a little summary so that you need to remember this part in your head. It's easier to remember in this manner. We're going to talk about how Johnson, because he doesn't have the clout and the popularity of Lincoln, the radical Republicans try to remove him from office. And they do that. I will give you some time to write. You can go ahead and pause. They do that through the impeachment process. An impeachment process involves a political official who's been elected or appointed, such as the Supreme Court, committing a crime or being accused of a crime and going to trial. If a president is impeached, that does not mean they are kicked out of office. All it means is that charges are brought against the president and they go to a trial. The House of Representatives, they bring the charges. They act as the lawyers. And the Senate, all 100, serve as the jury. We have had two presidents to be impeached, Andrew Johnson and Bill Clinton. Neither one was kicked out. They were both voted by the Senate to remain as president. So, we've talked about Andrew Johnson being impeached. And it really was because he did not get along with the radical Republicans or his cabinet. Lincoln had appointed his cabinet. Lincoln gets killed. Johnson assumes his cabinet. Assumes means he gets them. He inherits them. He didn't appoint them, so he doesn't get along with them. Especially, and you need to write this down, Edwin Stanton. Edwin Stanton was Secretary of War. And the radical Republicans knew that he was going to be kicked out. Or, excuse me, they knew he was going to kick out to remove Edwin Stanton. So to prevent this, they passed the Office of Tenure Act. Write that down. Office of Tenure Act. Which basically said he had to have permission to fire any of his cabinet members. Office of Tenure Act said he could not fire his cabinet members. Andrew Johnson fires Edwin Stanton anyway. Because of that, he gets impeached. So there are two different reasons why he gets impeached. Number one, different idea of Reconstruction. He's a president. He wants to be lenient. The radical Republicans, they want to be harsh. Number two reason he gets impeached, he violated the Office of Tenure Act and fired Edwin Stanton. He was not kicked out of office. So right after the Civil War, we have three amendments that are very, very, very important. It's very easy to remember these amendments. They follow in order. They're basically the slavery amendments. And it follows this process that if you can just remember the process and remember the numbers, you'll remember it the rest of your life. You have to be free before you can be a citizen. You have to be a citizen before you can vote. 13, 14, 15. So 13th Amendment abolished slavery. You have to be free. 14th Amendment gives everybody who was born in the U.S. citizenship. So all the slaves who were born in the United States are now citizens of the United States. With citizenship, you get the rights of Americans. 15th Amendment gives all males the right to vote. Remember, women do not get the right to vote until the 19th Amendment. So just remember that process and remember the numbers. So the next slide is going to talk about African American progress. I'm going to give you a second to pause and to write. So here are some things that happened that really helped African Americans succeed. Morehouse College was founded, and it was founded in Atlanta. And it was set up for African American males, and their goal was to educate African Americans and give them a chance in life. The other thing that the government passed was the Freedmen's Bureau. And really, guys, if you missed this on a test, you just didn't read the question. The Freedmen's Bureau is exactly what it states. Free man's organization. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, is a government agency. So the Freedmen's Bureau is a government agency to help freed slaves. And they gave them just the basic necessities of life. Unfortunately, a lot of the freed slaves didn't have a lot of opportunities. There wasn't widespread opportunities for jobs, for education, and so many ended up living in the same houses that they lived in as slaves, and were given a little piece of land to grow food, and they had to work the fields to purchase that land. And so the lives didn't improve immediately, but obviously it's better than slavery. Here's a picture of Morehouse College. You see that it was founded in 1867. Civil War ended in 1865. So that tells you like it really happened immediately after the Civil War. And you can visit there today. Hopefully some of y'all will attend Morehouse. And here are some prominent alumni. MLK, Samuel Jackson, and Spike Lee. If you don't know who he is a producer. He's a huge Knicks basketball fan, and he really is famous to most sports fans for that. He used to make commercials with Michael Jordan all the time. But gave you a little website there to look. Hopefully y'all guys, you'll look into that because it's a really good school. Alright, so we just talked about how African Americans had an opportunity to succeed through the Freedmen's Bureau, Morehouse College. This slide talks about the hindrances to their achieving the 14th and 15th Amendments. The South passed a couple of laws that were known as black codes. And I want you to think of black codes as very negative towards African Americans. Just like you guys think the dress code is horrible, the black codes were horrible to African Americans. And they were passed in the South, and they basically kept African Americans from gaining the 15th Amendment, which is the right to vote. Obviously, this only involved the males. So the first two that you see there are poll taxes and literacy tests. So when people would come up to the ballot box and they would go to vote, sometimes they would have to pay a tax. Thing is, African Americans didn't have a lot of opportunities to make money, so many times they didn't have any opportunity to pay these poll taxes, so they weren't allowed to vote. In other instances, they had to pass literacy tests. You'd have this uneducated white guy walk up, sorry, and he'd go to vote, and they'd say, you know, can you read? He'd say, no, I can't read. And so say, okay, well, make your mark. And he'd literally just put an X on the piece of paper. And that was sufficient enough for a white guy to vote. African American walks up, and they say, you know, can you read? And he probably said, hey, I'm not well because I wasn't allowed an education, and so I can't. So, okay, well, you'll need to decipher this passage from the Constitution which is very hard to understand. And when they couldn't do that, they were turned away. If all else failed, whites could vote through the grandfather clause. If your grandfather could vote, you were allowed to vote. And this was directly attacking newly freed slaves. Because, of course, the grandfathers of these African Americans could not vote. So they were turned away. At the same time, the Ku Klux Klan, a white supremacist group, was created to intimidate African Americans. And they would burn crosses, they would beat people, they would hang people. They really did a lot of horrible things. And early on, a lot of these Klan members, throughout the next 100 years, were prominent white citizens. They were judges, they were sheriffs, they were politicians. And so they played a big role and were able to hide their identity behind a mask. You don't have to write this, but these were nicknames given to two groups, and it really just kind of interesting that people came to the South to try to take advantage of the situation and to help African Americans. Sorry, it's been a long day, getting a little tired. Carpetbaggers were called that because they literally had these cheap travel suitcases that were like a cloth bag. Scallywags, they were Southerners who wanted to help African Americans, and a lot of the whites resented them, so they called them this negative term called scallywags. So if you've ever heard scallywags in a song, that's where the name comes from. And there's a picture of the carpetbagger coming south. He's kind of a wealthy guy, and he looks kind of like a conniving guy. He's coming to make some money and to help African Americans. And there's that ugly bag that he carried around, the carpet bag. And I believe this is our last slide. Reconstruction was the time period immediately after the Civil War, and it ends in 1877. Republicans controlled the White House all the way up until 1876. Democrats were in the South, Republicans in the North. Republicans started out as the Abolition Party. Abraham Lincoln was a Republican. Andrew Johnson was a Republican. And all the congressmen were Republicans. Now today, most of the South vote Republican, but that's because the party changes. And we're going to talk about the change through the next century and a half. But I just want you to know that in 1876, during the election, Samuel Tilden and Rutherford B. Hayes went through the election process, and there was no majority winner. Nobody had a majority of the votes. And as a result, the Republicans decided to make a deal with the Democrats in the South. If they allowed Rutherford B. Hayes to be president, then they would remove all the federal troops from the South. To ensure that African Americans had their rights and that people weren't continuing with their slave practices, the South was divided up into military districts. And so basically it was martial law. Martial law means that the military is in charge of the laws. They control all of the governing process, the election booths. They're there. They're keeping order. They're in charge. So through the Compromise of 1877, year after the election, they made a deal. The Democrats said, hey, we'll let your Republican be president if y'all will remove the troops from the South. When the troops are removed, Reconstruction is over. Make sure if you have any questions about this, first just read it in your packet. It's not very long. And ask questions. Hopefully you can hear this, because if not, I'm going to throw this computer through the window. And I apologize for my voice sounding worse than it normally does. My cold could not have come at a worse time. So, I hope you enjoyed this first installment, and we can have many more, and hopefully the uninterrupted lecture can help you get the whole story, and not just pieces of it every 10 minutes. Hope y'all are having a good class period. And that last slide was for Coach Misko when he was subbing for me a couple years ago. And y'all's test will be coming up soon. Make sure you do work on your study guide. See ya.